everybody, and welcome to the 2015 Nerd of the Third Power Halloween Spooktatular. I am your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, is our resident mad scientist, the Cat. Cat, how you doing?
I'm just going to point out that once again, you have missed the opportunity to call yourself the master of ceremonies.
I thought about saying it, but I didn't want to stoop to John's level. With us this week are our two most wolfish members, Brian and John. How are you guys doing?
Wolfish? You're just saying that because I have a nice beard. Don't disrespect the beard.
Well, you've got the beard, and John's got the hair up top. I mean, it's there, man. What am I gonna do?
Not to mention, I do get an insatiable bloodlust every full moon.
They're irrefutable evidence.
Yep. So how are you guys doing?
Well, I'll give you guys a little bit. I've been fighting off a cold. I've taken NyQuil about 5 minutes ago. So if I happen to pass out, I apologize.
Okay.
It's okay. If you pass out, I'll just give you like a poke under the table. See if I can stir you.
So yes, but this week is our Halloween Spooktacular, and as is our tradition, we have decided to theme it around a classic horror movie monster, and this year it's werewolves. So, this year, we will be reviewing the 1941 Lon Chaney Jr. classic, The Wolfman, and the 1980s cult classic, An American Werewolf in London. So, yes, that's going to be a lot of fun. But, of course, there is procedure to follow, so we're going to begin, as always, with our Halloween-themed Ask a Geek. And we have a few questions here. First one here comes from Phil Grady, and he asks, what's the first thing you can remember dressing up as for Halloween? So, Brian, why don't we start with you on this one?
I think I just had one of those old skeleton costumes where, like, it was just black with the bones on front of it. Not, in particularly scary nowadays. Not really scary back in the day either. But that's, like, the best memory of the first costume I've ever really had.
Okay. John, I'm just going to go ahead and just take a guess, based on how well I know you, and guess that you were a vampire of some description.
The first costume I really vividly remember, like, picking out myself and everything, was actually a Beetlejuice costume.
Really?
It would be. It would be,
wouldn't it? Yeah. It was, someone sewed the suit for me because I didn't, family friend sewed the suit for me because I hated all the store-bought costumes, and, like, I had the makeup done and everything, and I won. I won the costume contest I entered in school.
Good for you.
Good for me, indeed.
Good for me! All right, Kat, what about you? What was the first Halloween costume that you recall dressing up in?
I definitely remember dressing up as Princess Jasmine. But that was when I was like 7 or 8 or something. So I know I had other costumes before then, but I don't really remember them. But there are pictures of me dressed as Snow White. And my mom had handmade me a costume and everything. Actually, my mom handmade like all of any time I did a costume, I think my mom handmade it for me. So Snow White is the first one I remember seeing pictures of myself as, but Princess Jasmine is the first one I actually remember wearing.
Okay. Well, let's see. My very first one, it was probably one of those lame baby costumes. Like, oh, he's a little pumpkin, things. But the first one that I remember clearly was Batman, and there's a bit of a story that goes along with that one. Because I dressed up as Batman when I was, I think, like 6 years old. And, I went out trick-or-treating with my dad and my sister. And as we were, doing our thing, trick-or-treating, I ran into a group of friends, from school, and wound off breaking off, from my dad and my sister to go off trick-or-treating with them. What the classic thing you're not supposed to do on Halloween, wander off away from your parents, yada, yada, yada. So, of course my dad flipped out, so he called the police and had them casing the neighborhoods, looking for me. And the descriptor that he gave them was, my son's dressed in a Batman costume. This was the year Batman Returns came out in theaters. So I want you to try and guess how many fucking Batmans there were walking around the streets of Annapolis that year trick-or-treating.
About 3 or 4.
100.
1,000.
Yeah, when the police finally, when the cops finally, and my dad finally caught up with me, the reaction from my dad was, of course, "Oh, Billy, thank God we found you," and the reaction from the cop was, "Thank Christ, this is like the 9th one that we've seen in the last hour." So my dad instituted a new rule after that year, which was no costumes based on movies that had come out that year.
I would have thought a leash would just solve the problems real quick, but...
What do you think? You think I was raised in West Virginia?
I'm just saying.
Put the kid.
Make it easier to keep track of you if you were on a leash.
Put the
It's
youngins
easier to
on,
keep track of most people on the leash.
Put the youngins on a leash and give them a doggy treat. Yeah, okay, all right.
So should I send back the Christmas gift I got him this year? I thought it was it's a brand new leash.
What the hell do you think I'm into? Jesus. All right.
No, we just gotta keep track of you. That's the problem.
I'm moving on because this is going in some very weird directions here.
I'm just
Only
sitting
because
here
you're making it
quietly.
that way.
All right. Moving on. Next question comes from Mauricio from the Facebook. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And his question is, what was that unintentional scare moment in a otherwise not scary movie or other medium that you remember? So I guess an unintentionally scary moment from something that you wouldn't really classify as a horror property. So, Kat, why don't we start with you on this one?
Literally the whole of E.T. You guys don't understand. Like, when I was, 4 years old or something, was living on this tiny little military base. We didn't have, a movie theater or anything, but there was a big projector in one of the halls, and they got all the kids together, and all the kids on base, which was probably in reality 10 of us, we all got together and watched E.T. And again, I'm 4, I don't understand what's going on, and my brother and I are terrified. All of the kids are terrified, and ever since then, everything about E.T. creeps me the fuck out.
What about
So
Reese's
literally
Pieces?
the whole of E.T. is unintentionally scary for me.
Brian, what was that question?
I said, what about Reese's Pieces?
You know what? I'm okay eating Reese's Pieces because my fingers look normal.
No.
But that shit haunts me, ugh. And then when I went to Universal Studios, but the one in Japan, I was trying not to be freaked out by the E.T. ride, and we went on it because we went on all the rides, and I was just like, okay, this isn't the creepiest thing ever, but as you're going through the line, you hear E.T. talking, and I'm like, no, even in Japanese, he sounds creepy. It's just this E.T. denwashita, E.T. denwashita, really fucking creeping me out.
Oh, and let's not forget the best part about the Universal Studio E.T. rides. If it's anything like the ones in America, the best part about it is he knows your name.
Probably didn't. Probably didn't know my name, because he probably wouldn't have been able to pronounce it, because it was Japanese E.T.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the Large Marge scene.
See, I would debate, though, that that's unintentionally scary.
Well, it was unintentionally scary for me at the time, because even though I love Pee Wee Herman, I still do, and that was such a great film, and it has its Pee-wee-ness of it. That claymation...
Please never say pee-wee-ness ever again.
That's a word you gotta be real careful with.
Too late now. It's in the show. Anyway, but even at the moment when she turns and she just becomes claymation for no apparent reason, he just goes, "Wah!" As a child, you're like, "What the shit was that?"
Okay.
It didn't bother me as much because I'm a third claymation on my mother's side, so.
Okay, so John, what's your unintentionally scary moment?
Well, again, this may be debatable about how unintentional it was, but I definitely think that it wasn't intended to be as scary as it was to me for some reason. And I promise this isn't going to turn into the all Beetlejuice story hour. But the animated version of Beetlejuice everybody's seen the intro for that, I'm sure, with the crazy music and everything. But there's two versions of the intro. There's one when it first started, and then they did a later one in the later seasons. And in the later version, like the very first shot of the intro is this uncomfortable close-up of Beetlejuice's skeleton in his grave, like uncomfortably close-up shot of his skull with its eyes closed, and then Lydia says his name and his eyes open up, and it was one of the creepiest looking things I had ever seen as a kid. And it's really weird, because normally I would have been all about that sort of thing. But for some reason, just something about the way it looked really set me off.
Okay.
Now I love it, but you know.
All right, I guess it's my turn to tell a story. Well, a bit of context. When I was a small child, wee baby Gonzo, I was a big fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, both the movie and the cartoon. And when I was a young child, Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure. Was it Bogus Adventure or Bogus Journey?
Bogus Journey, my friend.
Bogus Journey. Okay, I always get the two confused. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey came out. So, my parents decided to go take me to see it at like 5, 6 years old. You remember the scene at the start of the film where the robot copies reach in their mouths and like undo their face like a mask to show the robot skull underneath?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I didn't sleep for like several days after that, and my mother was furious at my father for taking me to see the film. Simply because of that. Otherwise, completely harmless film, but just that one scene where they open their faces up and it just couldn't. I was scared to go to the dentist afterwards because I was scared to death he was gonna like reach into my mouth and just like pull my face off.
No. They prefer to reach into your wallet
and pull your face off. That seems very inconvenient.
It's a very roundabout journey to do that. Okay.
In a similar vein of things that shouldn't have been scary but were because I saw it when I was too young, Gremlins was not something a 5-year-old should watch.
Oh, yeah, I could see that being a problem.
So I recognize now that Gremlins is kind of funny and it has comedic shit to it, but like when you're 5, the song Do You See What I See like ruined for the rest of my life because I will always associate that song with Gremlins and like Gremlins exploding in a microwave and knives and shit. Like fuck that movie.
That's incidentally why we never do a Christmas episode, by the way. Is because she doesn't want to hear that fucking song.
And we also couldn't play it because we don't own it.
Isn't it public domain? But well, anyway.
Oh, here's a good one from the email from Samuel. And he asked, what is a Halloween candy that you absolutely could not stand getting when you went trick-or-treating?
Ooh,
Circus
Laffy
Peanuts.
Taffy.
Okay, one at a time. Kat, you go first.
We're very passionate about food, and mine was
Mostly because
like,
we can't afford it.
yes, like banana Laffy Taffy.
Okay, so just the banana ones?
Yeah, and then anything that's supposed to be like sour apple or watermelon flavored, because those are not actually flavored like the things that they say they're flavored like, and I find them really nauseating.
Okay.
After that, I'd eat about anything, although I think I got really burnt out on Smarties, and I really can't eat Smarties anymore.
Okay. Brian, what about you? Halloween candy that you couldn't stand?
I said the Circus Peanuts because Circus Peanuts isn't candy. That's just leftover styrofoam packaging.
that they've dyed orange and dusted with sugar.
Don't dust it with sugar. It's rubber. It doesn't look right. Like, look, it's a peanut, but it's candy. I'm like, you lied to me.
You lied to me twice. This is neither peanut nor candy.
Okay. All right. John, what about you? What's a Halloween candy that you couldn't fucking stand?
I have no idea what these things are actually called, but they came in orange and black wrappers, like alternating. One wrapper would be all black, one would be all orange, and they were this chewy, like light brownish thing that didn't taste like anything that you want in your body at any time.
Did you just describe circus peanuts again?
No, it's something else entirely. I don't know.
No, here's the funny part. He doesn't know the name of this, but when he described the packaging, I know exactly what they were.
Well, then enlighten us, Brian.
I don't know what they called either. No one knows what they're called, but we know what they are.
They weren't branded. Like, they didn't have labels on them. It was just some candy.
You thought when you open it up, it's supposed to be like caramel or caramel, however you want to say that word, but it wasn't. It's a mystery thing.
It was a lie.
It looks like it should be caramel flavored, but it's not. It just tastes like... And you never see them for sale in stores. I've never seen them for sale in stores. I'm not convinced that they come from this world.
Okay. All right. So I've got 2. The first is fucking Now and Laters. Because, holy shit, you bite into one of those things and you don't know if your jaw's going to break or if it's going to wind up, at first it feels like you bite into it, it feels like your jaw's going to break, but then after they start softening up and becoming chewy, you feel like that you're going to open your mouth and it's going to rip some of your teeth out because it's fucking sticking your goddamn teeth. Like, I still to this day hate Now and Laters. And the other one that I really hated was when I was a kid, Safeway, which is a grocery store chain here on the East Coast, for those who don't have Safeway, had their own store brand candy. And for some reason, they were just like this block in my neighborhood of 20 houses that they gave out nothing but Safeway brand chocolate bars. And, we bitch now about the fact that, Hershey bars don't have real cocoa in it, or they're not made with real chocolate like they are in Europe. I'm convinced that these Safeway brand chocolate bars were made from sawdust and children's tears, because that's how they tasted. There was no part of it that tasted like chocolate at any point. I had a friend who, we were talking about this actually last week, and he remembers these chocolate bars too, and he said, I'm not entirely convinced that they weren't just baked dog poo. That's how fucking bad these store brand chocolates are. And so that's why the one thing I ask everybody to do, if you're giving out Halloween candy this year, please, for the love of God, do not cheap out on the fucking chocolate. And Samuel's got a second question here that goes with this, which is, what's a Halloween candy that was your holy grail growing up? So again, Kat, we'll start with you. What was the Halloween candy that you most look forward to getting?
Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And it was doubly so because that was one that my parents really liked too. And when they would go through my candy, to check it to make sure everything's safe, but also to charge me a small fee for babysitting and walking me around, my own parents, goddammit. Of course, parents have the right to take some of your candy, and they would want to go for the Reese's. And I would throw it, I'd put all of my candy out on the floor, and my brother and I would do the same thing. We'd just roll all of our candy out and start organizing it. My brother and I would trade, and then our parents would come in, and then they would start snatching up our Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, and I wasn't having none of that because it's the best.
Okay. All right. Brian, what about you? What was your holy grail of candy?
Oh, it might have been Nestle Crunch Bars. Oh, I love Nestle Crunch Bars. I don't know if it's because it's a little crispy, crispy innards of it or whatever, but I would just hoard those. It'd be great.
Okay. John, what about you?
Before I answer, can I just say how much I love the phrase crispy innards? That's going into my regular everyday vernacular.
The sad part is you would figure out ways to use it every single day.
Oh yes.
The burrito, the outer part of the burrito was nice and soft, but the meat, the crispy innards is what I'm really into.
That's when you don't microwave them all the way. But anyway, probably Starburst would be my favorite. I love the heck out of Starburst. I still love the heck out of Starburst. I will eat them almost any time. I finish whole packages by myself. I cannot be trusted around them. Except maybe for the lemon ones. You guys can have those. They're not so great to me.
Love those.
Okay.
My favorites are the cherries.
For me, it was the fruit flavored Tootsie Rolls.
Oh, those are good too.
And for the longest time, you couldn't buy them. In you had to go into the candy aisle in the grocery store and you can get the big bags of candy. For the longest time, you couldn't get flavored Tootsie Rolls on their own. you could only get them in like the big Halloween variety bags. And it wasn't until I want to say like 10 years ago, it was the first time I finally saw fruit-flavored Tootsie Rolls just in big bags on their own. And it was like, yes, there is a God. He loves me very much. He's giving me fruit-flavored Tootsie Rolls. And I bought like 20 bags.
This is how I felt the first time that Starburst for Christmas made an all-cherry Starburst bag with just like nothing but the cherry ones in them.
And it was funny. I went to the cashier to check them out, and it was like, "Oh, you must be expecting a lot of trick-or-treaters this year." No, bitch, these are for me. Okay, I'm giving myself diabetes tonight. You better call Wilford Brimley because I'm gonna need some insulin.
And also because I think the Thing is loose in my house.
So yeah, that was the holy grail for me as far as Halloween candy. So that is all the Ask a Geek questions that we have for this week. As always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdofthethirdpower.com, and we also have a permanent Ask a Geek thread on our Facebook page. So yeah, get your questions in. We love reading them on the air. And as is our Halloween custom, we are foregoing headlines this week in favor of an extended discussion topic. And this year we are discussing werewolves. Specifically, we are looking at probably some of the two most famous werewolf films ever made. The 1941 Universal classic The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., and the 1981 film An American Werewolf in London. So we're going to do old versus new and, see which of the films are a mighty beast and which are, just kind of mewling pups. So let's start with the 1941 classic. And John, I know that you have reams and reams of things to say about this film.
Oh, I can't imagine what makes you think that I have anything at all to say about old school Universal movies that I've seen a few hundred times each. Well, let's see.
He gets out a notebook.
Yeah, he gets out his personal diary from like 9 years old.
I wish I had thought to. Oh wait, no, I do. Hang on, I have.
Oh my God, he's got a PowerPoint ready. Run, everybody, run!
I was just gonna click my pen obnoxiously a few times. But no, okay. So the Wolfman. When it comes to Universal's monster brand, basically Wolfman is one of the big three. It's Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman, in the order in which they appear. And the Wolfman is of course portrayed by Lon Chaney Jr., who as his name suggests is the son of the original Lon Chaney, who was another incredibly famous movie actor, particularly well known for his makeup and outlandish appearances. But the 1941 Wolfman basically set up a lot of the tropes of modern werewolf movie lore and TV lore. Like a lot of things that people attribute to werewolf folklore can be directly tied back to this movie specifically. And it kind of set the standard for every werewolf production that would come afterwards. It wasn't the first werewolf movie. Wasn't even the first werewolf movie that Universal Studios made. But it is definitely probably the most famous, the most often referenced, and the most often imitated. But never quite, I don't want to say quite equaled, but there's a few things about it that haven't been quite done justice in later versions.
Now, for my part, out of the Universal Classic stable, the Wolfman was always the one that I had the hardest time taking seriously, even as a small kid. I thought he just, I looked at him and I was like, that's not a werewolf, that's just Dad if he doesn't shave for a week.
It's really funny. It's funny how these things change over time, because a lot of things that you look at to measure, what popular culture and what culture in general was like in generations past. You can look at the comedy movies and you can look at the horror movies, because those are often the ones that seem, I don't want to say the most dated, but the most particularly of their era. Because humor and fear, the things that scare us and the things that make us laugh seem to change a lot more drastically than other things. I mean, the Wolfman was terrifying when he debuted, but yeah, nowadays you look at it and you're like, that's a guy with yak hair glued all over him. And it really was yak hair for the record, but
wow,
it's just yeah.
Okay. So, Brian and Kat, what did you guys think of this film?
I enjoyed it for what it definitely stood for. I think I enjoyed the Wolfman a little bit more than I enjoyed Dracula or the Frankenstein. Mostly because it was a very... I like the simple story behind it. A lot of the old Universals had a very, very easy to follow stories. But this one definitely became more of a tragedy kind of situation. Because when you think about it, the Lon Chaney Jr. character, like, he just shows up to, get back to with his estranged father, and he's moving into this huge estate, and he's cursed, and now he's a werewolf. You're like, oh shit, that sucks.
Yeah, life sucks for him. I'm not gonna lie, it just straight up sucks for him.
He doesn't have very much going for him. Like, it does pretty well suck to be him. I don't know. This was one of those films where I was certain I had seen it at some point in time, and then as I watched it, I'm like, no, I definitely never saw this movie when I was younger. I must have seen some other werewolf film, but I really haven't seen that many.
Yeah, this one, like I said, so many movies imitated this one. For decades, that Lon Chaney-style werewolf makeup was the default werewolf that you would see in movies. It was all over the place, imitated tons and tons of times. It really wasn't until... well, we're not going to get to it quite yet, but really wasn't until An American Werewolf in London that we started seeing things really going in a different direction. But that's getting ahead of ourselves.
Oh yeah, the things were copied. Well, I wouldn't say copied, but also homage. The transformation sequence that he goes through, where it's the fade in, the fade out as his hair grows longer. I can't count how many times I've seen that used in other situations. It was in the Freakazoid cartoon, for
yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, it's but Brian, you bring up a good point, actually, bringing in the tragedy angle, because I think that's what gives this story more resonance and makes it last a little bit longer. Well, and again, that's something that's carried over to almost every werewolf movie that comes after this one. What were you about to say, Gonzo?
Well, I was going to say, if we're going to discuss the tragedy, let's, for some context, kind of explain the plot of this film, such as it is.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'm perfectly willing to do so. So, as we've mentioned, the movie stars Lon Chaney Jr., who is playing a man named Lawrence Talbot, or Larry, as he likes to be called. Despite not sounding in the least bit British in his voice or mannerisms, possibly because he's been living in America for the past couple of years, or just possibly because Universal was like, screw it, nobody's gonna care. He's returning to his ancestral home in England because of the recent death of his identical twin brother. And he's, as mentioned before, he's kind of trying to restore the relationship with his estranged father and get to know the area which he has not been in for a great number of years. He gets there, he immediately takes a liking to this girl that he meets there under somewhat weird and slightly creepy circumstances by today's...
Slightly creepy.
Slightly creepy? He was spying on her with a telescope that could probably look at Mars. That was the most powerful telescope I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's, okay, maybe it's more than a little bit slightly, especially when he tells her that he's been doing it. But, so he meets this girl that he takes a liking to. They go to a little carnival run by, I guess it's a carnival. I don't know what else you'd call it. Some gypsies have come into town, and they're doing fortune-telling and palm reading and stuff like that. He goes to get his fortune told by Bela Lugosi, who is very originally playing a character named Bella in this movie. He is himself a werewolf. He sees the mark of the pentagram, which... No, wait, actually, he sees it...
He sees it on the friend.
The girl, that's right. As I was saying that, I'm like, no, that's wrong. He sees it on the girl, the other girl. He sees that, he freaks out and sends them away. He turns into a wolf when they're wandering in the dark and misty woods and attacks her, and when Lon Chaney Jr. Larry Talbot is trying to fend him off, he gets bitten and becomes the next werewolf in town.
And the rest of the film is basically him coming to grips with this and trying to keep himself from becoming a murderous wolf and killing the people he cares about, including this woman. I think her name is Claudia, who who's in spite of his creep-tastic behavior, has fallen in love with him. Which, what that says about her state, I will leave to you to decide.
Also, she's engaged.
Yeah, she
can't get over that
engaged.
enough.
This honestly says more about the mindset of 1940s Hollywood than it says anything else.
But yeah, what struck me about this film is again is like the tragedy behind it, because so many horror films you see, especially monster films, there's the people are getting killed, the person becomes a werewolf, or if this movie was made nowadays, Larry would be like this asshole character that we're supposed to hate because, hey, he's going to eventually turn into a wolf and start killing people. But here, the film paints Larry as, a very tragic character, and, even the gypsy woman whose son is the original werewolf, and her son winds up getting killed by Larry, is just like, yeah, this sucks, but you know what? I don't blame you. This is through no fault of your own. And I love that sort of pathos to this. And in fact, I actually read about this film as I was doing some research on it, that originally they were going to play it like you wouldn't know whether or not Larry was actually becoming a werewolf or if it was all in his head. And is it just me, or can you really still see a whole lot of that in this film?
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
It's definitely like that. I actually thought for a long part of the movie that they were going to go there. Like, that it was all going to have been in his head. And I thought that would have actually made a more interesting film. But it wouldn't have been as iconic. It wouldn't have set the werewolf into an icon, status if it had been like that. But I thought that would have been a really neat way to go.
Another thing that I really liked about this film was, the whole film is only 70 minutes. Yet in that time, it manages to tell a whole and complete story. And it managed to, set up its world without having to beat you over the head with it. Within the first 5 minutes of the film, we see Larry come up to the estate, we see him greet his father, and, they have a short conversation about, his brother died and how, their relationship's kind of strained. And right there, you have everything you need to know about the characters, whereas you made this movie today, that'd have been like 20, 30 minutes of film right there.
A little bit, but I also like the fact they held off on, at the same time, they held off on the actual vision or the Wolfman, when he turned into the Wolfman for, like, the first time. Like, that came in, like, at least 3/4 into the film when he finally had his first transformation. So it was great. So while it's, I get your point, but I also like the point of, even though it is a little bit on the short side, you do get everything, and they still are managing to hold back a little bit for good cinematic purposes.
Oh, absolutely. And, that transformation sequence. It's only a couple of seconds on film, but that took a whole lot longer to actually do for Lon Chaney. That makeup took 6 hours to apply and 3 hours to take off.
Nowadays, it would take 9 months in front of a computer.
Yeah, I know, right? But, yeah, it's just... God, it's funny. There's almost so much I could say about this movie that I almost can't think of anything to say about this movie because too much of it is jostling around in my brain. I think a lot of this movie's impact, a lot of its longevity and its influence on everything really does stem from the performance of Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry. More so Larry than the Wolfman, because he really sells how upset he is at this situation. He really sells how unhappy this entire business has made him and how tormented he is about this. And he does this in every single appearance that he puts in as the Wolfman, because of course this movie was too successful and popular not to be left alone. They managed to, even though he dies at the end of the movie, they managed to resurrect him to appear as the Wolfman in 4 other movies. And
the last of which being a crossover with Abbott and Costello, of all things.
Yes, Abbott and Costello
hey.
meet Frankenstein.
Don't be talking shit about Abbott and Costello.
Look,
I see you over there.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm a Marx Brothers man, okay?
Ooh, things are getting serious down in here. But it's interesting. He's so thoroughly identified with this role, and he's the only in the original cycle of Universal films, from starting with Dracula and going to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is where it ends, he is the only actor who played Larry Talbot / the Wolfman in any of those movies, and it's the only one of Universal's classic monsters that's only portrayed by one person. So he really made this role completely and 100% his own.
Okay, so what were some standout moments of the film to you guys?
The number of Americans that were in it. What is going on with the number of Americans in what is supposed to be an English town, a small English town, not even like a big city or anything?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's not
recall,
like it's London.
Recall this was 1941 and there was, a fucking war going on in Europe, so it's not like they could call up Winston Churchill and go, hey, do you mind if we do some filming in the south of London? Yeah, I know, the Blitz and all that, but, we'll just be there for, in and out in a couple of months.
A war which, incidentally, is kind of conspicuous in its absence in this movie, isn't it? There's not even a reference to a war going on, not one
Dude,
whatsoever.
that would be the easiest way to kill off the brother.
He went to war.
I know, right? But what was it? Wasn't it something like a hunting accident?
Yeah, it was a hunting accident. It was like he was shot because he had like a games guy on the guy who was originally engaged to the love interest. Like they would go hunting or whatever, and someone, I guess, accidentally shot him because he wasn't wearing an orange vest.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting to note, though, that despite the fact that there's no mention of World War II in this movie, it's definitely touched by World War II, because the screenwriter, Kurt Siodmak, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm gonna mangle it, was living in Germany when the Nazis took over, and his whole life was thrown into chaos, and he got the hell out of there as soon as he possibly could. And as a result of that, there are some people who kind of maybe they're projecting, maybe they're reading a bit too much into it, but they see it as kind of a metaphor of having a life that's fairly calm and fairly under your control, and you're kind of digging it, and then all of a sudden some disaster completely outside of your control just slams into you and fucks up all your shit, to use the technical term as psychiatrists use it. And some people read that as kind of a metaphor of that. Larry is, despite the fact that his brothers died and he's kind of not on the greatest terms with his father and kind of getting used to being in this little English town after spending all these years in America, honestly, for the most part, things are kind of going well for him. He's pushily hitting on a girl that he likes that for some reason seems to dig it. And he's got a lot of money and a lot of big nice house and everything, and then it just all goes to hell because of a seemingly random wolf attack.
Okay. What about you, Brian? Any other standout moments for you?
I mean, I like the technical aspects of a lot of the films and things like that, and I always like looking back to see the old ones. And, I kind of knew about the whole makeup and the transformation effect, and just felt really sorry for the actor, but he seemed to take it all, but that really helped with his performance. What's kind of interesting is, I think one of the best takeaways from the film is also the paranoia that the town got because of it. A town that, because I guess it's old and not really a specific date, but the old superstitions of werewolves and murders coming back into play kind of sent everyone else for a loop, and then they're like, well, obviously it started when he showed up. And I think that's also something sort of forgotten about the film itself, is that the town turned against him like immediately. So he was a man on his own for a long period of time trying to get this done. But it also kind of ended in a way in a weird ironic twist, he became a hero, because everyone's like, oh, he must have fought off the wolf and died, poor soul. Obviously he was never really the murderer. And I was like, wink.
Yeah.
Like, you got off real easy.
And you want to talk about pathos? Can you imagine being his father at the end of that movie?
Oh God.
I mean,
you've lost two sons. I killed one of them.
Yeah, you've just lost one. You actively played a role in killing the other one, but at the same time it was a mercy because you're freeing him from this horrible curse, and you literally watch this monster transform into the body of your son in front of your eyes. That's the kind of thing that messes you up for a while.
Yeah.
Not that I have experience.
Sure you don't.
What I found was really weird, and I think it's just because of, I was born in this age and not that age, but there's a lot of, like, the whole, like, pentagrams and, like, a lot of satanic symbolism associated with the werewolf that, like, obviously, historically isn't there, but is in the movies.
Well, pentagrams aren't really necessarily satanic, but you could get me talking for hours about that. But it's definitely
they imply
imagery.
it as satanic.
Yeah, it's definitely mystical and occult imagery, and that's one of the things that was added to this movie. Or invented for this movie, along with that short little poem that literally everybody in the cast says at least once, and which shows up in so many other movies under different variations. That stuff was concocted for the movie to give it a bit more, I don't know, to make it a little bit spookier. And you don't really see... It's kind of interesting to see the things that did catch on and the things that didn't catch on, because I can't think of another werewolf movie where that pentagram imagery shows up other than this one. I don't even think they used that again in the sequels that had the Wolfman in them, though I could be wrong about that.
Point of order, I can think of another movie that had pentagram imagery in it and involved werewolves. We're going to be discussing it in a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah!
But it only had that imagery because the Wolfman did. But yeah, I've never seen that in another movie. And then obviously, like, the silver bullet thing they mentioned. And that's, of course, in, like, every iteration now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is where it came from. And they're like, and it wasn't just silver bullet, it was like silver anything. Like, if you just had silver, you're fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, his dad beat
as long
him
as
with
you
a
can
silver
use
cane.
Yeah. I have the silver spark. What?
See, I thought you were going to say silver spork, and
that is what he said.
Oh, I thought he said spark.
That's what I heard.
Could have been both. Who knows?
So if
Well,
you just show up
hopefully
with
you
the
do.
Silver Surfer, does that make it okay?
He's just, well, he has the power cosmic, so he's like, you're not a werewolf anymore. Bloop. Oh, okay.
Movie over.
Perfect. Silver did solve it.
Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much covered all the ground that we can with the Wolfman. So let's move on to our contrasting film, the 1981 comedy horror cult classic, An American Werewolf in London. And I'm going to start by saying, wow, this movie gets weird at points. Like, I just want to, like, before you, I want to call attention to some of the dream sequences, and just the one in particular, just bring it up out of context. A suburban home in New York getting attacked by Nazi werewolves.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who thinks that could be a movie in and of itself? Nazi werewolves in New York. Yes, sir. I would like a ticket, please.
Listen, we don't need to give Sci-Fi Channel any more ideas than they already have that they're going to waste.
Army of Frankensteins.
Army of Frankenstein. I'm going to find that movie when you told me about that.
Oh my god.
But what struck me mostly about this film was narratively, it was almost in a way almost a remake of the Wolfman story, because a lot of the same beats were there. You know, character gets attacked by a wolf, and then, you know, he's a decent person through no fault of his own, and winding up having to come to grips with the fact that, you know, he's a murderous, bloodthirsty killer at night.
I'm pretty sure that's how pretty much every werewolf movie goes. It has to have, like, those things in it.
Well, I can think of some exceptions, because there's another werewolf movie that came out the same year as American Werewolf in London, The Howling, which has a very different plot by werewolf movie standards, including the fact that the werewolves are completely unsympathetic in this movie. They're just assholes. But
There's going to be a couple.
yeah, there's always going to be a couple in the group. But
There's only one guy who's like, I love killing people. You're like, Jesus.
God damn it, Dave.
Steve?
Jerry, calm down.
I like how we all gave him different names.
Yeah, not Steve, Jerry, Billy Bob. But yeah, it's the most common path for the werewolf story to take. And again, even Universal's first werewolf movie, which was the 1935 movie Werewolf of London, has a similar a similar plot, a similar mold going on for it. So it's the most common route for a werewolf story to take.
A thread that I noticed, it really only hit me when I was watching this movie, but there's a thread that I noticed, and we kind of touched on this, I'll kind of link this back to our vampire discussion last year, and that's the sort of the underlying theme of aggressive pursuit of sex. With the werewolf, with the vampire, we talked about how, they kind of embody, seduction and kind of luring you in. Whereas the werewolf, I got kind of a much more aggressive, almost, to use an uncomfortable word, rapey sort of vibe in these films' treatment of sex and how the werewolf fits into that. Am I the only one who noticed that?
I mean, no, you're definitely not the only one who noticed that, because film critics like reading sex into everything from, like...
Because they ain't getting none themselves.
Oh, you just made me sad. Film critics like to read sex into everything from, overt metaphors to like, cans of soup is what I was going to mention. But yeah, it's... You're definitely not the only one who reads that into it, and that's even more explicit in The Howling, which I just mentioned earlier. But really, though, I think it's a bit deeper than just that. The whole metaphor with the werewolf in fiction in general, it's a Jekyll and Hyde thing. It's supposed to be about the dual nature of man. Humans, not just specifically men, but it's the dual nature of humanity as something that is animal and something that also at the same time likes to think of itself as more than animal. And the duality between that, the whole, good versus evil, human versus animal, all that stuff just gets pulled into the werewolf metaphor. So the sex is part of that. I don't see it as the dominating metaphor for when it comes to werewolves.
Okay. So why don't you give us a brief plot rundown of An American Werewolf in London?
There's an American, and he's a werewolf, and he's in London. There.
That is the briefest plot.
Whoa, I didn't see that at all. Were we watching different movies?
Let's see. We got a couple of American backpackers going around in England, as you do. They get attacked by a werewolf while they're wandering around in the middle of nowhere at night during a full moon, as you do. And one of them survives and the other one does not. And of course, the survivor is our werewolf. And his name has completely slipped right out of my brain. David, thank you. I know it'll come back.
And then the dead one is Jack.
The dead one is Jack, yes. And speaking of the dead one being Jack, that is one of the big, innovative, interesting gags that this movie uses. Because this movie has a lot of gags. John Landis, the director, had mostly done comedy movies. And even after this, he mostly did comedy movies like Animal House and Blues Brothers and stuff like that. So there's a lot of comedy in this movie. David regularly sees the ghost, the spirit of his friend Jack, who is essentially, telling him, "You're a werewolf, life sucks. Only way out of this is for you to die. It's the only way me and any of your victims can be at peace is if the werewolf dies." And David's like, "But I don't want to die." And Jack's like, "I didn't either, and look at me."
So, life sucks, you should kill yourself. So he was basically a Tumblr user before there was Tumblr.
Your hate boner for that website is starting to really get on my nerves.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Low-hanging fruit. Anyway, and the fun thing about Jack in this movie is that every single time he appears to David, he looks more messed up than the time before then, because his ghost is basically decaying. It's implied as his body is decaying. So he's more rotten and more skeletal every time, but he still talks and acts like a perfectly normal person.
I gotta tell you, some of my favorite effects work in this film was the last time we see Jack in the porno theater, and he's pretty much, his skin is pretty much just rotted off his face, so he's pretty much a talking skull. And I wanted to ask you, John, was that an animatronic?
I'm not I couldn't. There were a lot of really complicated special effects in this movie, done by one of the best special effects guys there has ever been, Rick Baker. Interesting to note, 1981 was the first year that the Oscars gave awards out for special effects, and this was the first movie to win an award for an Oscar for special effects. So it made an impression on a lot of people. I don't know all of the techniques that he used, because he used a mix of them. So I can't tell you with 100% certainty how he pulled that scene off. Of course, the most memorable special effects scene to me has got to be the actual transformation of David into the wolf. Because this one had another, this is another one that kind of set the mold for the genre from here on out. I guess I should really say subgenre, because werewolves are like a little niche within horror. In that, in all the previous versions of werewolves, the transformation was kind of peaceful, kind of trance-like. You know, Lawrence Talbot sits down in a chair and kind of goes into a daze as he just gradually shifts from being a human to a wolf. And John Landis said, no, I want this to look like it fucking hurts. I want, you know, all your nerves are going crazy as your bones are stretching out, your muscles are changing, like every part of your body is shifting and changing to something else. I want this to look like it is hell to go through.
Because it would be, man. It would be.
And it's so incredibly memorable. I can't... This it's the scene that everybody talks about who's seen this movie, or everybody talked about when this movie came out, because no one did it quite like this one did up until that point. Now, of course, like I said, everybody does it.
Okay, so what were some other standout moments from this film for you guys?
I'll tell you something that's just, I'm not sure, this isn't like a standout moment, but because I know John Landis, some of his filmography, is that before he made this film, he made Animal House and he made Blues Brothers. This does not feel like a film he made, if it makes any sense. Because Animal House is this raunchy, over-the-top frat house versus the system style story that's just full of booze and boobs. That's all that movie is. And then you have Blues Brothers, which is a, you know, cross-country style musical. So it's like, all right, now I want to kind of make a sort of a dark humor werewolf story. And it doesn't look like, it doesn't, at first, doesn't feel like one of his films. Like, this was very much out of the box going, I'm going to do something different. And then afterwards, that was fun. And he went off and did, what was it, Three Amigos or something like after this one?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. This was a pretty major departure from him, because the only other horror-related thing that I recall him being involved in, and this is let me double check to make, this was after American Werewolf, was he directed the Thriller music video.
Oh man,
Wow.
And yeah, I know, right? And other than those two, like, everything that he did, I mean, he did do a movie about Burke and Hare a couple of years ago, but other than that, he pretty much didn't do horror. And you're right, this is very stylistically different from everything else he did. Despite the fact that he still kept in his weird, wacky comedy moments.
I mean, he had his gags, but this obvious humor is way darker than what he's ever done before. And very, you know, because your best friend is now dying and telling you to kill yourself. I'm pretty sure he's like, this is hilarious. I'm going, this is messed up.
I was disappointed that Jack at no point in his trying to get David to commit suicide, I was disappointed that at no point did he ever say anything along the lines of, look, I'm telling you to kill you because I love you. I'm saying this with love here.
Yeah, it's you know how that's actually something that I'm not 100% sure that they would have in a movie these days, because, like, you know, it's kind of funny. That's one of those topics. Suicide in general is one of those topics that people used to joke about a lot more than they do these days, because I guess they didn't take it as seriously, or they just, I don't know. I've noticed that you'll see stuff like that a lot more in older media than you do in modern media. Even at Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion starts with a suicide joke.
I think a horror type story is one of the places where you can kind of get away with that, because, I mean, you know, people are going to die anyway. You know, may as well have a laugh at it.
Well, yeah, but even in non-horror stories, I mean, how many Looney Tunes shorts ended with a character putting a gun to their head?
Well, anyway, we're getting a bit off track here. So, Kat, what was a standout moment for you in this film?
Well, I was going to talk about the comedy, but you guys literally said everything I was thinking. Can we just talk about that scene in the porn, like with the porn going on in the background? Because that to me is some sort of gold. Like, there's some ridiculous humor, but none of it feels cheap until you get to the porn. And then you're like, no, this is still amazing. Like, the humor feels a little more subtle. It feels a little more, it's not like, fart jokes and stuff like that. It's, it's
This
wit
isn't
and
Animal
it's
House.
banter, yeah. And it feels really, it feels a little more mature. And then you have them running around naked, but you're like, but it's still funny. And then you have the scene where there's porn going on in the background, and you're like, what just happened? But it's still hilarious. They're having this very serious conversation about how he needs to kill himself with porn going on in the back.
I'm sorry, serious? No, I'm sorry. It stopped being serious to me once the married couple came in and they were all like, completely chill with what was going on. Hi, I'm Gerald. This is my wife Marie. Pleased to meet you. And they're covered in blood.
Yeah, it was it's funny you mentioned the scene of him running around naked earlier. That actually leads to possibly my favorite line in the entire movie, where the little boy just walks up after he's run off with his balloons, and he's like, "A naked American man took my balloon."
That should be a euphemism for something, but it's not.
Well, now, I wasn't going down that road.
Yeah, I'm not touching that with a 100-foot pole.
I'd like to harken back to the slaughtered lamb, because we didn't mention it at all yet. And it's the very, very creepy pub where most of this starts, where the two Americans are trying to get out of the cold weather, and they are hitchhiking, and they've just gotten to like the first town that they could find, and they go in for, trying to get something hot in their bellies, and it becomes awkward because clearly the people in this town have something to hide, and they're kind of curious, but also kind of like, man, we really don't want to mess with this. And it gets into this whole, like, obviously here's a group of people who have something to hide, and we know that they're hiding something, but the other characters don't understand what they're hiding. And it's very shady. Very shady.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, too, because this touches on a couple of tropes from other horror movies that weren't really used as much in werewolf media. It's kind of like in Dracula, when in the book it's Jonathan Harker, in the Universal movie it's Renfield, arrive in Transylvania, and the natives there are all acting weird. The villagers are all acting weird and kind of freaked out by the fact that he's going to this place they know is dangerous, and they kind of try to warn him off of it, and he ignores them. It's not something that, to my recollection, showed up in a werewolf movie before now. The whole, weird, off-putting villagers, kind of sensing that there's something not right, or even being outright told that there's something not right, but ignoring your better judgment and going ahead with it anyway, and bringing disaster upon yourself that way.
I call that the Crow T robot principle. I calculated the odds of succeeding versus the odds of I was doing something incredibly stupid, and I went ahead anyway.
The other thing that I found really interesting about these, and I think it's just because I'm more used to modern portrayals of werewolves, they talked about, lycanthropy? Mm-hmm. Where they, in both of these films, they mentioned the mental condition as something that was more believable than an actual werewolf. So the hysterical idea that this, somebody gets that they have become a werewolf, and they will assume animalistic behaviors, but they can't actually transform into anything. And so people who have, the people who aren't affected by it, but are, hearing these werewolf tales are like, well, this person could suffer from this issue because they had some sort of trauma fighting off a wolf, and now they think they're a werewolf. but they actually have this mental condition. And I thought it was really interesting because we don't really bring up that sort of thing in modern monster movies. At least that I've seen.
Could possibly be a scientific explanation behind it?
Yeah,
a little bit more mundane.
The idea that instead of it actually being a supernatural thing, that it's actually a mental disorder. Like, that was the first assumption that they had, was it's this very specific mental disorder that makes you think. We get that for vampires because there is that actual disease out there that makes people really super sensitive and people have to drink blood, and there are actual things out there. But with this, it's simply this person thinks they're a wolf, and they're not because they're kind of crazy.
Right.
Yeah, I think it doesn't come up as much anymore as it used to, because it kind of had to come up in the Wolfman, because the Wolfman was such an early trailblazer in this whole werewolf movie genre. And it came up in An American Werewolf because, well, it kind of made sense in the plot. He wakes up in a hospital, and also because the plot is deliberately echoing some aspects of the Wolfman. There's deliberately homaging the Wolfman. But I think, honestly, it doesn't come up as much these days because I think audiences are just less patient with that. They go in knowing that they're seeing a werewolf movie. They don't want to hear some asshole try to explain to them how it's not really a werewolf movie. They just want their werewolf. That's what they paid their $10 for, and they're gonna see it.
Get out of here, science. I'm here for superstition.
I do want to, before we kind of wrap things up, I feel we would be remiss if we didn't actually call out the effects work on the actual wolf in this movie, because that was spectacularly well done, especially for the 80s. I mean, you go back and you look at some 80s monster films, and it's like, oh, well, that just looks dumb as hell. But the wolf in this movie, when we finally see David as the werewolf full and clear, it's really well done and legitimately frightening.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, I know that I keep mentioning this even though it's not one of the movies we're discussing right now, but like I said, in this same year, 2 different movies about werewolves came out to sort of, and their task was to reinvent the werewolf, since pretty much everything had been in the Wolfman mold up to that point. And they both took wildly different directions in terms of their reinvention of the werewolf. And I think of the 2, this one definitely had the better one. He just looked fantastic in wolf form.
Well, wasn't one of the problems about the film getting made is that John Landis couldn't get the money because the special effects budget was going to be ridiculous?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have no doubt about that. Absolutely, yeah. That's always the issue with filmmakers who want to make this kind of thing. They always want more money because they want everything to look fantastic, and the studio's all like, yeah, here's $5 and a stick of gum. Go nuts.
Speaking of running out of the budget, my God, that ending. It was like, I thought for a second that the copy that I was watching was Bork, because it was just like, I love you, David, snarl, bang, bang, cries, cut to black. And I'm just like, was I watching The Sopranos just now? What's going on?
Yeah, that's the most abrupt ending this side of Monty Python.
I was just like, I was like, was it always scripted that way, or was that literally because they just ran out of budget?
I don't know the story behind it, but I want to say it's that like, goes, this is where the story ends. And they're like, do we need an epilogue? He's like, no.
I think it's there to remind you that David is a tragic character, and I think a lot of werewolves are tragic characters, so it's here to go, look, there was no way this wasn't going to happen, so we're not going to do it delicately. And I think it's also there to sort of remind you that while a lot of the movie has been funny, it's still a dark humor, and you shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it is a horror, and so it ends quite brutally, just like heartlessly gunned down and dead.
Yeah. Brutally, and with no, like, you have to sit on that sad moment, it ends on a down note.
And then it tries to be uplifted by going, we congratulate the Princess Diana of Wales on her wedding. And it's like, oh, that's not uplifting anymore.
Well, it's It's funny because before we want to mention it, I love the fact that John went out and got like every single Moon song in the last like couple of years, because that Blue Moon, Moon Dance, and Bad Moon Rising on its soundtrack. He's just like, haha, this is hilarious.
Moon, 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 moon. And
Damn
did
it,
I mention
Moon. There were literally, I watched the credits, 3 different versions of Blue Moon on there.
Yes.
Yeah, and he didn't get to use the top 2 versions that he wanted to use. He originally wanted to use Bob Dylan's version, and at the time, Bob Dylan had briefly converted to Christianity and didn't want his music in an R-rated movie. And Elvis Presley's version wasn't available because of there were big lawsuits going on involving his estate. So he's like, well, at least there's about 40 million other different versions of Blue Moon to choose from.
And that was like all of the music. And I think that's one of the things that weirds me out a little bit about older movies, is that there isn't constant noise. And we're so used to lots of explosions, and there's always background music to set a mood. But here, there was literally like, 6 songs, and 3 of them were Blue Moon.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so all right, we're kind of running out of time here, so let's start winding things down. So, which of these 2 films do you think told the better story?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I don't think either one of them told a better story. I think they told different stories, and only slightly different stories. And I think they told them both quite well.
Okay.
It's fun. It's funny because like last couple times we've done this, like we've had a feeling like this is sort of a better version or a better storytelling. This year we got that really tough choice, but we just have 2 like equally good werewolf movies that both started their own trends and like are both remembered fondly for their own reasons. So like they're on the same pedestal. There's no like better version of it. It's just one's a little older.
They're both kind of hammy, though. Let's be real.
Yeah, but wonderfully hammy.
Yeah.
So much ham.
Jimmy, get some eggs with this ham.
I have a hard time deciding which one is the better story, because they're both a very similar template, as has been mentioned, but they take such different directions with it. The American Werewolf in London takes it in a kind of comedic, almost goofy way, but then reminds you of the tragedy of it right at the end. And Wolfman is just like kind of tragic and somber for the most part all the way through. If I were to say which one I think had the more emotional impact and emotional resonance, I'd probably give the edge to Wolfman. But then my loyalties tend to be old school anyway. But they're both excellent.
Okay.
If I had to pick one, I would say Wolfman obviously is very good, but I'd say American Werewolf in London has more rewatchability factor to it.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially with those incredibly memorable visuals, like Nazi werewolves storming into a house and
I want to see that movie. I don't care how bad or how cheesy it is. I have to see Nazi werewolves in New York.
Get Robert Rodriguez on the phone.
Oh shit, he would do it too.
Yes, he would. Yes, he would.
I love how Brian just sounds scared to death of that.
Yes, I do. Well, he's a native. He lives like an hour.
Well, hey, go knock on his door and be like, hey, I got an idea for you. And then he'll be like, hey, who are you and what are you doing at my house?
Like, hey, I'm calling the cops. Get off of my front porch.
And then the cops will be like, hey, hands up.
Wow, you got here really fast.
And then we'd be like, hey, we're all out of time.
We are. In fact, we are all out of time. So that's all the time that we have for this year's Nerd of the Third Power Halloween Spooktacular. We hope you guys all have a great Halloween. Get lots of candy, whether you're trick-or-treating or buying yourself or, mugging kids on the street for it. Please don't do that. That's mean. Although if you do it, please, get it on video because, I'm evil and heartless and all that stuff. But, yeah.
And here come the lawsuits.
But yes, we hope you all have a great Halloween. So, we'll see you next week. Thank you as always for tuning in. I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the cat.
I'm Brian.
And I'm John. And that's all I have to say this time.
All right, we'll see you next week. Taka, play us out.
Oh.
I am the shadow on the moon. children will not me. This our town of